Hi, everyone. It's A Ticket to Christ. We're talking about honoring God, and we're looking at another example, and this is David. David, if you read the whole account, was running for his life from Saul because God anointed David as the new king of Israel because Saul had turned away from God, and God was looking for a man after his own heart, which was David. And out of envy, Saul then decided to try to murder David. And so David had to run for his life, right? For years, I think like 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. So we're in 1 Samuel 24, picking up at one of the accounts here as he's running from Saul. And it came to pass when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi." Then Saul took 300 chosen men, 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way, where was a cave. And Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, "Behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee." Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing that he is the anointed of the Lord." So David stayed his servants with these words, and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. And David also arose afterward, and went out of the cave, and cried after Saul, saying, "My lord the king." And when the king looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, "Wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, Behold, David seeketh thy hurt? Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord had delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave, and some bade me kill thee. But mine eyes spared thee, and I said, I will not put forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe, and kill thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine heart, and I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it. The Lord judge between me and thee, and the Lord avenge me of thee, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. As saith the proverb of the ancients, wickedness proceedeth from the wicked, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. After whom is the king of Israel come out? After whom dost thou pursue? After a dead dog, after a flea. The Lord therefore be judge, and judge between me and thee, and see and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thine hand. Okay, so we can pause there and you can read the rest on your own. What is jumping out at you? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? For me, what I am getting, I'm seeing why God said that David was a man after his own heart. Because you see here that David, out of reverence for God, right, wouldn't lift his hand against Saul, even though he could do it. It says in verse 6, he said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed." So David's heart was so soft that even to cut off the robe of this man, any little small thing, his conscience rose up, right? He couldn't do it. And he repented even of that small thing because he had honor. He honored God. It wasn't so much that Saul he's honoring. It's the office of Saul. And it's that God put Saul into that office. And so as long as God had Saul there, David would honor it because it's in honoring God. And I think that is what it means to honor God. That it's not necessarily that you might approve of someone who's in a position or whatever, but the office that God has them in, you show honor out of reverence for God. And of course, if God didn't put them in that office, that's a different story. But here, under the structure here, in the Old Testament, God had anointed Saul to be king, and until God removed Saul, he had to remain in that position. Also, what I notice is that God delivered Saul to David, and it would have been easy for David to say, oh, God delivered him to me, I'm going to take things into my own hands. But David had the wisdom and the good judgment to say, no, I'm going to let God avenge me. I'm not going to lift up my hand and take revenge for myself. And I see the takeaway here is, as a result of David, God's name is glorified. And so in honoring God, we have to think about what is it that we do that could dishonor the name of God. You know, the Apostle Paul talked about, and he rebuked the Romans, the Roman church, because he was rebuking them for the name of the Lord being blasphemed among the Gentiles because of their behavior, the Christians then. And I believe he rebuked the church, the Corinthians, for Christians taking one another to non-Christians to court, because it caused the name of the Lord to be blasphemed. And I see people using social media to, call out other Christians and gossip about them and tear them down. And it just brings the gospel, it causes the name of God to be blasphemed, because they're not doing it in a righteous way. They're not doing it in integrity. It's just this worldly way and this worldly thing. I'm not even sure that I'm expressing it well, but I know that it's not honoring God, how these things are playing themselves out. And so I think that the takeaway here is, to honor God, we have to really be mindful of what we're doing and what we're saying and how it reflects on the God that we serve. If your behavior causes the gospel to come under censure, if your actions, if you're cursing, if you're carrying on, if you're acting out as the world, if you're not obeying what God says to do, right? If you're not honoring God's covenants with people, God has covenant relationships, marriage, and other things that you have to make sure that you know and you honor out of reverence for God, right? So not taking things into your own hands, not following the patterns of the world or the ways of the world, but looking to the Word of God to direct what we do and why. And also rightly discerning the Word of God. Galatians 1 talks about, if you bring another gospel that's not taught, that the apostles didn't teach, that you're cursed. So you don't want to bring a cursed twist the gospel and a doctrine to suit your church and hold that up. No, we're to follow the truth of the Word of God according to His Word. And we're expected to find out for ourselves, praying, seeking the Lord with all of our hearts. So, beloved, that is it from me on this one. I see that we honor God by having respect for the offices He's established, the people He's put in positions for His covenant relationships, marriage, and other things like that. And just having a reverence for God and a respect for Him so much that what He says for us to do, as wives, for example, He says, respect your husband, you respect your husband. For husband, He says, love your wife, you love your wife. Children, obey your parents, you do that. Whatever it is, the structure is that God has set up, you do so Not so much necessarily because the person is perfect or doing everything right, but out of reverence for the God who put them in that position. So, beloved, that is it from me with this. Those are my thoughts. That's what I'm getting. I'm sure you're going to get your own great thing. Again, it's First Samuel chapter 24. But it would be good to just read the whole account of Samuel about David's life and seeing just his attitude toward God. This man ran for years from Saul, and he did not, it wasn't comfortable, it wasn't easy. And a lot of times he was just at his wit's end, just desperate and in an awful position. But he trusted God and waited for God's timing and believed in God's deliverance and in God's promise for him. And so, and that eventually came to fruition, and it was a sweet moment and a good moment. And that's why to this day, we're talking about David and that Jesus came from the lineage of David. And that's why in the New Testament, you see them call him Son of David. It's not that he's David's son, but that he is of that bloodline. So that is it from me, beloved. I hope this has given you a lot of food for thought and blessing you in some small way, and that you're getting your own personal insights, more beyond what I can share here and, through revelation that God is giving to you. Have a great day. Take care.